Yeah, I'm on it. All right, I will say good morning. Let us begin. A good tava for giving the shir yesterday, and Baruch Hashem, what a great schos it is to begin a new week with a new parak. Beginning by thanking all of our sponsors today. Our Talmud Torah sponsors for the month of Nisan Haba Leinu Latova, Avram and Shindi Kelman, for dedicating the shir this week, shir drashos and shirim this month in memory of Aharon's mother, Sarah Braina, Bas Yoshua Heschel Zichron Livracha. And our Daf Yomi sponsors for today, Ayala and Sarah Steinberg, in the schus of continued health for Shulamis Chana Bas Susha and for an ultimate refuah shalema. Also, I can't believe that none of our Chabad friends sponsored this year today in honor of the Rebbe's birthday. This is shocking. All right, I'll do it. Good. Apparently I'm the biggest Chabadnik here. All right, good. So Meretz Hashem, we dedicate our learning in the schos of the Rebbe's birthday. Meretz Hashem, halavai we should be zocha. All of us are Hasidim of the Rebbe in all different kinds of ways, as it's probably very few people who could have the lasting impact in life and in death, as the Lubavitcher Rebbe Zecher Tzaddik Kadosh Livracha did, transforming all of Klal Yisrael and reminding all of us that we each have a beautiful shlichus. We each have a beautiful and holy and incredible mission we have to accomplish in this world. And halavai, there's no doubt that the Rebbe accomplished his and continues to accomplish his. And halavai, we should each be zochei meresem to discover and to accomplish ours. And of course, we dedicate our learning in the schos of our precious brothers and sisters in Eretz Yisrael. May Chadash Baruch Hu, Meretz Hashem, protect them, look after them, give them the staying power and the strength, and Meretz Hashem, to weather this current war, to protect the holy soldiers of the IDF, and Meretz Hashem, who are Moser Nefesh, Al Kedushas Hashem Am Ba'aretz, May HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Meretz Hashem, give them tremendous hatzlacha, tremendous strength, oz and gevura, to be able to fight this war on behalf of Klal Yisrael. And Meretz Hashem, all of those who have fallen, their neshamas, shav and aliyah, their families in nechama, and halavai, we should see incredible yeshuas and nechamas in this month of Nisan. Well, so with that, let us begin. Today's daf is Ayin Zayin 77, and we are picking up in Meretz Hashem at the Mishnah. Thank you, I think I mentioned before, thank you again to Rabbi Richter for giving the shir yesterday. So we are picking up at the Mishnah on Ayin Vav Amud Beis 76b. The Mishnah says as follows, HaToda, so still continuing in the topic of Toda, and Meretz Hashem now still delving into the technical details of this incredible carbon. Satoda Hay Sabah, Chamesh Sein Yerushalmios, Shehin Sheish Midbarios. So we'll say this is very interesting. How much flour? Now remember again, the Toda was a very large carbon. Remember again, comprised of 40 loaves, 10 loaves of 4 different types, which we'll get into in just a moment. We've already spoken about, we'll talk about it more now as well. How much flour? How much flour was used in total for the carbon Toda? So the carbon Toda, the Mishnah says, was made of 5 se'in, 5 what we'll call Yerushalmi se'in, which were six desert se'in. So apparently, as we're going to discuss this more in the Gemara, sometimes different locales had different measurements. So we'll call it the desert se'in was different than the Yerushalayim se'in. So it was 5 se'in Yerushalmius, which were 6 se'in Midbarios, which is shtei ephos, 2 ephos. An epha is 3 se'in. It turns out that the total Rabosai was Esrim Isaron. 100 Isar. Now, the reason that last measure is important is because in all of this, Isaron is like the one fixed measure. So what you begin to see is, as it suggests, by the way, it's approximately somewhere in the realm of about 100 pounds of flour. That's approximately what this is, about 100 pounds of flour. So the Gemara says, Esrim Isar, which makes sense, right? Because you're making 40 loaves. Right? The loaves are different, but again, approximately about 100 pounds of flour. Esrim Isar. Now again, we'll say, so, and by the way, that's the easiest out of this entire discussion. The easiest one to remember is that 20 isaron of flour, right? Because that's the fixed measure. So out of that 20, asar l'chametz v'asar l'matzah. Now remember again, as we're going to see, half of the flour was used for chametz loaves, half of the flour was used for matzah loaves. Now again, just to be clear, matzah doesn't just have to mean matzah. I know we have a one-track mind this time of year, right? So we're thinking matzah, flat, so matzah, there's a way to make loaves that were also non-chametz. And again, also remember, this goes back to what we said before, which is, in general, menachos were not chametz. The only menachos that were chametz were, 2 of them were, Toda and shtei alechem, right? And even now the difference was shtei alechem, both loaves were chametz. Toda, only some of the loaves were chametz. Okay, so 10 isarn for chametz, 10 isarn for matzah. Top of ayin vav, 76a. Asar lechametz. Again, I will say. So now, interestingly enough, so then there were 10 isaron for chametz, isaron lechala. Now again, there were 10 chametz loaves. So therefore, again, each chametz loaf got one isaron. One is right. So 10 isronos. Ultimately, again, for chametz loaves, 10 loaves, 1 isaron per loaf. Vasar lematzah. And again, I will say, now here's what's important. And then there were 10 loaves. 10 isaron for matzah. So half of the flour went to the chametz loaves, and now it's equally distributed 1 isaron per loaf. The other 10 isronos ultimately again went to the matzah. Vasar lematzah. Now here's what's interesting. When it came to matzah, shalosh minin. Matzah itself was made up. There were 3 different types of matzah loaves for the Toda. What were the 3 types? Interestingly enough, chalos. So that's what I'm saying before, right? Isn't that fascinating? That one of the non-chametz categories of matzah was called challah. We are such a confusing people, right? In other words, so one of the matzah categories was called challah. The second category was called rikikin, which are wafers. Now the reason it was called, why was it called challah? Why was it called challah? It was called challah because again, it did rise a little bit. Remember, I both say, you could have something that rises and is still not chametz, because chametz is all about the timing of it. So as long as you're going ahead and impeding the chimus process, you can be fine. So therefore, one category is called challah. One category was called rikikin. Now, a rakik is just as it sounds. Ultimately, it was a wafer. It was a wafer. And then the third, revucha. Now, if you look, by the way, bottom Rashi Kisveya, that bottom paragraph there, revucha. We'll talk about all of this, but Rashi just gives a good quick definition. Chalot beros chinkai revucha. This, interesting enough, the way this was made is it was scalded in water. Right? It was scalded in water. So in other words, you scalded it, and then that was part of the preparation. That's why it's called revucha. So again, 3 different, so when it comes to the chametz loaves, you had 10 chametz loaves made out of 10 isronos. That's it. In the matzah, and that was half of the volume of the flour. In the matzah category, matzah was made up of 3 different categories. Chalos, rikikin, and revucha. Right? Again, we'll discuss all of this. And then the 10 isronos were equally distributed amongst those 3 categories. Nimtzu, therefore, shlosha esronim ushlish lechol menumin. Therefore, there's 3 1/3 isaron for each type. The shalosh chalos isaron, and 3 chalos per isaron. Okay, so that's just a quick division of the isronos available. Ultimately, again, for the different categories of the matzah. Incredible. So we'll say, so therefore, the Mishnah just tells me 2 simple facts. Number 1, that halacha l'maisa, again, the Toda itself was made up of 5 Jerusalem si'in, which is the equivalent of 6 desert si'in, which essentially comes to 20 isaron, right? 20 esronim, right? 20 isaron. And if we just go with the isaron, 10 isaron for the chametz loaves, 10 isaron for the matzah loaves. In the chametz loaves, very easy to remember, it's just 10 loaves. 10 loaves, that's it. In the chametz category, you have 3 different types of loaves. Now remember again, there's a total of 40 loaves. So you essentially had 10 of them chametz, 30 of them matzah. In the matzah family, ultimately 3 different categories. You had chalos, rikikin, and revucha, and therefore the 10 isaron of flour was equally divided amongst those categories. That's it. Next. Over mid Yerushalmis. It's now interesting. I'm not sure why the Mishnah does this, but it's fascinating. So the Mishnah now does this same exact exercise, but divides up the flour in accordance with the Jerusalem measure. Over mid Yerushalmis, hayu shloshim kav. There was 30 kav. Chamisha asar lechametz, v'chamisha asar lematzah. Again, I both remember again, the numbers change a little bit, but the distribution is always the same. There is an equal split of the flour between the chametz loaves and between the matzah loaves. Chamisha, so therefore again, in the Jerusalem measure, there was 15, right? 15 kav for chametz, 15 kav for matzah. Chamisha asar lechametz, kavu mechza lechala. So again, if you do 15 kav for the chametz loaves, that turns out 1.5 kav per loaf, per chametz loaf. Chamisha asar lematzah, 15 kav remaining for the matzah. Uve matzah shalosh minin, and matzah has 3 different minin: chalos, urikikin, uravucha. Ultimately, again, the same thing so far. The matzah loaves are made up of 3 categories: chalos, loaves; rikikin, wafers; ruvucha, scalded. Nimsu chameshes kabin lechol min umin ushtei chalos lekav. It turns out that ultimately, again, there's 5 kav for each category of matzah loaves, and therefore, again, 2 chalos per kav. Incredible. So just the distribution. So we'll say, really fascinating. Now we see again. So the takeaways to remember is, again, leaving aside the difference between the Jerusalem measures and the wilderness measures, which we'll get to, the desert measures, which we'll talk to a little bit more in the Gemara. 20 sarn of flour, equally divided between the chametz loaves and the matzah loaves. Chametz loaves, there was only one type. 10 loaves made of matzah, that's it. Matzah loaves, 3 different categories: chalos, rikikin, revucha. Flour equally distributed between those 3 different types of loaves. Incredible. Hatoda haisa. Let's say, I'll just point out something that I think is very interesting. This, at least when you read it, it seems to be like a pretty complex carbon. Right? It's first of all, it's a big carbon. It's a big carbon, and also just the complexity of I know complexity is maybe the wrong word, but the categories of it. Right? It's so interesting. You bring a carbon told, I don't know. Give me either matzah or chametz, right? Or if you want to do both, just give me one category of matzah. But it's 10 loaves of chametz, and it's 3 different categories of matzah, and the flour distribution. Remember, you're supposed to say it's Beis Hamikdash, so the flour distribution has to be exact. It has to be exact. So there's 2 yisodos over here. So first of all, Kedusha, and this links back to our drasha yesterday, to the Shabbos Kol drasha, that Kedusha is very much associated with Seder. Like if you notice over here, it's not the exact amount of flour has to be allocated per loaf. If you want Kedusha, there has to be order. If you want Kedusha, there has to be Seder. Without Seder, you can't accomplish anything. And yes, people often like to say the devil's in the details. It's not the devil in the details. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is in the details. God is in the details. Life is all, sometimes a person will say, I'm a big picture person. I don't like to get, mixed up in the small, minute details. Generally, I would imagine that people like that don't accomplish all that much. If you're big picture, the one thing in life you'll accomplish is your big picture, right? But that's about it. That's about it, because God is in the details. Accomplishment is in the details. Right? Seder is the key to successful living. So it's incredible in this carbon toda. Because remember, I'll say, what is a carbon toda? A carbon toda means that you were saved from some type of life-threatening situation. That's when you bring a carbon toda, right? Like the Gemara says, you took a long boat journey, you got out of jail, you had some type of near-death experience. Generally, when you have an experience like that, how do you feel afterwards? We'll say on a very small level. A person is driving and you get into a very near accident that could have chas v'shalom been terrible. How do you feel after that? How do you feel? Right? Relieved, grateful. But I think also on a deeper level, or it's like a renewed desire to live impactfully. Now that's it. Right? Now I feel like Kadosh Baruch Hu is giving me a second chance. I'm going to take this on. I'm going to accomplish. So what's important to understand is, and same thing with carbon toda. I would imagine that halavai will be zocha. When you bring that carbon toda, you leave the Beis Hamikdash with a renewed lease on life. If you want to maximize that renewed lease on life, you need Seder. You need order. You have to know what's going where, what's being allocated where, how am I spending my day, how am I spending my time, how am I spending my life. If HaKadosh Baruch Hu has given me this second chance and has delivered me, literally again, from what could have been chas v'shalom, a catastrophic event, then that behooves me to live my life impactfully. And the way to do that, the first step to doing that, is Seder, is order. How much flour goes here? How much flour goes here? What kind of categories? And everything has to be organized. Because also remember again, if you do your carbon toda and you have leftover flour, what does that mean? What does that mean? That means you're in trouble. You gotta do it again, right? If you have too much flour, too little flour, it doesn't work. Carbon toda is an exact science, and it's an exact science that spans across many different categories. You want to live life successfully, make sure that your Seder is an exact science. Plan how you're going to use your time. Plan how you're going to use your day. Plan how you're going to use your life. Make life an exact science. Create Seder. And that's the key to beautiful and ongoing life success. Says the Gemara, Hatoda, Haisa ba chamesh sin Yerushalmius. Again, we'll say, so now the Gemara says, the Toda came, 5 si'in. Now again, the Gemara chooses to use the Jerusalem measure. So the Toda would come from 5 Jerusalem sin. How do you know this? Now again, I will say, now what the Gemara is really asking over here, Rashi explains, is how do you know that an ephah is made up of 3 si'in? That's really the Gemara's question. Because I will say, what I want to point out is, if you notice, the Mishnah said that the Toda comes 5 si'in Yerushalmias, that are 6 midbarios, that there are 2 ephos, and an ephah is 3 si'in. So really, at the end of the day, kind of like the basis of the entire Mishnah's measurement is this ephah being 3 si'in. How do you know that? Because the pasuk says, "Ha'ephah b'habas tochen echad yihya." So the Gemara quotes the pasuk from Yecheskel. The pasuk says that the ephah and the bas apparently is another measure. Tochan echad. It's the same measure. Tochan echad yihya. So the Gemara says, same measure. So the Gemara says, ma bas shlosh sin. Just like a bas is 3 sa'ah. Af ephah shlosh sin. So to an ephah is 3 sin. Okay, to which the Gemara says, okay, ubas gufa minalan. So where do you know that a bas is 3 sin? Ile mamidichsev la seis esmaser hachomer habas. So if it's right, ephah nami haksiv vasiris hachomer ha'ephah. Ella chomer lo yedana kama. Rather, the truth is, we don't really know how much a chomer is. Hachanami lo yedana kama. Ella mihacha. So we're asking a very simple question. The Mishnah's entire measurement system is based on this idea that an ephah is 3 si'in. We're just looking for a source for that. Ela mehacha. Rather, we learned it from here. Now the Gemara quotes from the pasuk from Yecheskel again. The chok hashemen habas hashemen umeiser habas min hakar aseres habatim chomer ki aseres habatim chomer. Okay, so now watch this. So I'm going to explain to you what Rashi says about this outside. So Rashi says, essentially, based on this pasuk from Yecheskel, we arrive at the following measurements. A bas is 1/10 of a kor. A kor is 30 sa'ah, and therefore that makes a bas 3 sa'ah. And again, the Gemara understands this all, actually, because the way Rashi explains, we'll just do it outside, but the way Rashi explains it, is this is all pretty explicit in this pasuk in Yecheskel. So from here you see, ultimately, again, for our purposes, that a bas is 3 si'in, and now going back, the pasuk in Yecheskel, the first pasuk we quoted, equates a bas with an ephah, and therefore, again, halacha l'maisa, if a bas is 3 si'in, and a bas is the same thing as an ephah, therefore an ephah ultimately, again, is also 3 si'in, and that's where the Mishnah comes up with it, where the Mishnah says, ha'ephah 3 si'in, shalosh si'in. Good, beautiful. Amar Shmuel. So we'll say now an interesting halacha. Shmuel says, now one of the interesting things that we saw from our Mishnah is that you could have a measurement that has the same name, but yet varies from locale to locale. Now granted, again, here the 2 locales are the Midbar, the desert, and Yerushalayim. So again, and yet you see that the Se'in in Yerushalayim was one way, and the Se'in in the Midbar was a different way. So now, interesting, Shmuel says something very interesting. If you want to increase the particular volume of a particular measure, you cannot go ahead and increase it yoser mishasos, not more than 1/6. Not more than 1/6. So let's say again, a community says we want to increase, right? We have something called the sa'ah, and we want to increase the volume of the sa'ah. For whatever the reason, right? We don't increase the volume of the sa'ah. So Shmuel says, you can't go ahead and increase the midah. You can't increase the volume of any particular measure more than 1/6. Just like you can't inflate the value of a currency more than 1/6. Now again, I say 1/6, and you think, oh no. Right, this is back to our Baba days, right? So again, we'll see. Let's see. The Gemara says, "Lo yistaker yosem mishasos." And again, if you're going to profit, you should not profit ultimately more than 1/6. Again, let's analyze all of this. So the Gemara says, Rashi says, "V'amistaker ba'ochal nafesh." Good. So Gemara says, "My taima. What is this? What is this 1/6 idea?" So the Gemara says, this is so fascinating. Maybe you're concerned about inflation. Now, what does this mean? What would be the inflation issue over here? Take a look at Rashi Kisveyad. Rashi Kisveyad. So take a look, which is the bottom Rashi, about 3, 6, 8 lines in. This is actually really interesting. Now, I will say, so imagine. If let's say in Baltimore we decide to go ahead and increase the volume of a sit-in. So sit-in is whatever, we'll call it, let's just say we're adding on, again, 5 ounces to the sit-in. What's going to happen to the price of a sa'ah? Sorry, what's going to happen to the price of a sa'ah? What's going to happen? It's going to go up. Now, why is it going to go up? Why is it going to go up? Because you're getting more. So this is very interesting. Rashi says, Yoser, so when you increase the volume of the sin, then what happens? Maskil hashar lehisyaker. Obviously, the price of a sa'ah is going to go up. Why? Mipnei yiseros hamidos. Because remember again, that's because you're getting more. You're going to pay for more, right? Because you're getting more. But what's the problem? So what's going to happen? But the moment that the price of a sa'ah goes up, it's going to end up going up even more. Why? So this is fascinating. So let's say in Baltimore we decide to add on 5 ounces to a sa'ah, so therefore by definition the price of a sa'ah is going to go up. What's the problem? So in Baltimore we know, because now you're actually getting more. So it's not that the price went up, you're actually getting more for your sa'ah. The problem is in Silver Springs, right? They're going to hear about it, right? They're going to hear about it, and what's going to happen? Right? They're not going to know, so the sa'ah is going to go up. They're not going to know that halacha l'maisa, the reason why the sa'ah went up is because in Baltimore we added 5 ounces to it. They're just going to hear that what? That the sa'ah went up. So what are they going to assume? There must be an impending famine, right? There must be some type of issue that's happening, and therefore halacha l'maisa prices are going up. This is very interesting. But however, so it sounds like, so therefore the Gemara is saying, maybe that's why we limit any type of increase to measures by 1/6 in order not to create a panic. To which the Gemara says, well, if that's the case, but that's not true. Because the truth is that even if you increase it by 1/6, still you could create a panic. In other words, if we're concerned about creating inflation, then the truth is increasing any standardized measure by any amount could realistically lead to that. Why I will say, because at the end of the day, if you increase the measure of an established measurement, right? If you increase the volume of an established measurement by any amount, by definition, you're going to charge more. If you have to charge more, then others who do not know about the volumonic increase will assume, yes, that's right. That is right. The volumonic. If they do not know about the volumonic increase, then a halacha l'maisa, they're just going to assume something's up. Volumetric. Excellent. If they don't know about the volumetric and volumonic increase, then they are going to assume that perhaps there's some type of issue, and that can lead to inflation. If that's what you're concerned about, then even 1/6 should be problematic. To which the Gemara says, "Elo mishum ono." So no, let's go back. Rather, this is an issue of overcharging, right? This is an issue of ono. Now, we'll say, remember again, right? Ono 101. What happens with ono? If you overcharge by less than 1/6, what's talacha? Batal. It's part of the cost of doing business, right? Over 1/6, what's talacha? The sale is void. 1/6, the sale stands, but the merchant has to return the 1/6. So maybe it's because of no. So therefore, the Gemara says, just keep it simple. We want people's transactions to stand. So therefore, we say, if you want to increase the measure, right, the volume of a particular measure, now again, I just want to point out, we're not talking about over in these cases, we're not talking about where, one merchant decides to do this unilaterally, right? What do we call that? Right? We call that cheating, right? Or that's what we call that, right? So we're talking about where a community decides to increase the volume of a measure together. But again, the concern is if I'm doing business here, then I do some business with somebody out of town, they don't know that information. So again, as long as I keep it to 1/6, right? 1/6 or under, either it'll be batal or the transaction will stand. If the other person can claim they did not know about the increase, I would have to give it back. So the Gemara says, Vaha Amarava, here's the problem with this. It's actually quite interesting. Amarava, called Davar Shebamidav Shebamishkav Shebaminyan, Afilu Pachos Mikadei Ona Chozer. So Rabbi say this is actually quite fascinating. The halacha by Ona is anything that is normally sold in exact amounts. Mida means right in unit size. Mishkal means weight. Minyan means number. Is not subject to the laws of Ona. Now, what does that mean? Take a quick look at Rashi. Bottom Rashi again. Bottom Rashi. Rashi says over here, Kol davar shebamida, kevan dekapid lo machil. Shabbos said, listen to this. The laws of Ona essentially say like this, that when you're doing business, there's an understanding that there's always going to be some swing in price. Right? And therefore, again, as long as the swing is less than a sixth, that's fine. That's part of the price. That's part of the cost of doing business. If it's a sixth, no, that's not acceptable. What the transaction stands, return the extra money. Or, by the way, I say return it. It's even, remember, Ona goes both ways. It can be an overcharge or an undercharge. More than a sixth, already, again, that's reckless. Sale is voided, and that's it. What's interesting is, if you're dealing with something that is normally only sold in units, either again by weight, right, or by unit, or by amount, that means a person in this transaction is makbid on exact amounts. So because you makbid on exact amounts, the whole laws of Ona don't apply. In other words, Ona assumes some level of variability within a transaction. So that makes sense when you're selling an item that is not normally sold in an exact amount. But again, if let's say you're buying something that is only sold in exact amounts, by definition, the laws of Ona don't apply. When I say they don't apply, that even less than a sixth is going to be something with which you could potentially go ahead and void a sale. To which the Gemara says, Ela mishum tagra, ki hechi delo limtie diana. So again, rather, this whole thing is because of the merchant. Ricky Rashi, just a moment again. Rashi says, still bottom Rashi. Now I'm about 6 lines up from before it ends. Ela mishum tagra delo limtie diana, mipnei hachamarim shekona tevua bekfarim umocher beir shelo yafsid. What we're concerned about actually over here is that halacha l'maisa. We're concerned about the wheat merchants who go ahead and buy wheat, let's say in Baltimore, then go ahead and sell it elsewhere. We don't want them to suffer a loss if they're, let's say, buying a sit-in in Baltimore, which means one thing, then selling it in Silver Spring, which means something different. We don't want them to suffer a loss. Shabbos says, it's incredible. To which the Gemara says, Diana hu delo limtie, Rav Chalobai. So this is great. That's all we're concerned, that they shouldn't suffer a loss. So doesn't the merchant need to make a little bit of money as well? The Gemara says, Zabin v'zabin tagra ikri. Why does a merchant sell stuff? Just so he could have the coveted title of being a merchant? You're going to say, why do people engage in business? Why do people engage in business? To make money, right? Jews, we are capitalists. We are capitalists, right? So again, we don't work for altruistic purposes, but rather we work to make money. So what do we, I don't understand, so you're making a whole takana over here to ensure that the merchant doesn't lose money? That's very nice, he shouldn't lose money. What about making money? To which the Gemara says, Ella Amarav Chista, Shmuel Kra Ashkach V'Darash. Rather, again, I will say, Shmuel found the pasuk and he dashed in. So I will say, at the end of the day, remember, this entire discussion was based on a statement of Shmuel. What did Shmuel say? If in a particular locale, they're looking to adjust measurements, as a community, we're looking to adjust measurements, or we're looking to adjust the value of currency. A community has a right to go ahead and do that, but you are capped at 1/6. You are capped at 1/6. You can't make a change that is more than a sixth. So we're trying to figure out right, where Shmuel is getting this from. So of course, when he says a sixth, it makes the most sense to say that it's Ona related. The problem is that the halachos of Ona don't apply to things that are sold b'mida, b'mishkal, b'minyan. So therefore, the Gemara says, you're right. In reality, Shmuel's statement, Shmuel's statement is based on a pasuk. What's the pasuk? Quotes over here from Yecheskel, or from Yecheskel today. Hashekel esrim geira, esrim shkalim chamisha, ve'esrim shkalim asara chamishim shekel. Hamani yelochem. So the Gemara says, mana. Masan v'arban havi. Now again, I will say, interestingly enough, ultimately, again, is a mana is really equal ultimately to 25 shekel, to which the Gemara says, To which the Gemara says, and the Gemara says, read that again. Mana Masan of Arbanavu is a mana 240 shekel. No, in fact, again, a mana would be more than that. Ela Shmamina Tlas. Right? I'll learn three things from here. Number one, Shmamina Mana Shal Kodesh Kapal Haya. Number one, I want to say what you see over here is that halacha l'maisa, the mana of the Beis Hamikdash had a different valuation than the stam mana of regular mundane currency. That's number one. So we'll say, so that supports Shmuel's idea in general that halacha l'maisa, different locales, because remember the Beis Hamikdash almost has like its own rules, but different locales have the ability to create different monetary valuations. Ushma mina mosifin al hamidos. Furthermore, we'll say, what do you see from here? You could add on to the volume of currency, right? Or to the volume of a measure. However, the ein mosifin yosem mishasos. But you cannot go ahead and add on more than a sixth. Because also, again, based on this idea, remember the mana is 100 dinar, which is 25 shekel. So what you see over here is they valued it at 240. It's not 240, it's 250. So you see over here that halacha l'maisa, again, there's the ability to revaluate currency, but when you revaluate it, you can't do it by more than a sixth. Again, I will say, three halachas the Gemara is learning out over here. Number one, that the mana of the Beis Hamikdash had a different valuation. Number two, you could add on two measurements. And number three, you can't add on by more than a sixth. So it turns out Shmuel darshan this based on the pasuk in Yecheskel. Now, by the way, the Gemara adds on one more. Ushma mina shesusa milabar. Furthermore, again, I will say, when you add on a sixth, how do you add on a sixth? Milabar. Milabar means literally from the outside. We've actually had this before Baba Metzia, right, by Ezu Neshek. When you go ahead and you add on a sixth, what that means is you take the current value, you divide it by 5, and you add on an additional fifth. In other words, you make the new valuation 6/5 of the original valuation. That's what it means to add on from the outside. Good. So says, Ravina says, Masnisin Hamideka. Our Mishnah supports this as well. Our Mishnah, literally our Mishnah. Tiktani, Tauda Haisa Ba'a Chamesh Sein Yerushamios Shein Sheish Midbarios. And again, I will say, here it is, that the Toda itself was 5 Jerusalem sins, which was what? 6 desert sin. So again, a difference ultimately again of a sixth. So again, I will say that was this entire time, but a very interesting choshen mishpat halacha, which is that halacha a community has the right to go ahead and change their weights and measures collectively, has the ability to change the valuation of their currency collectively, but has to be mindful that those changes can never exceed a sixth. Because again, internally, it's not a problem. But externally, once they start doing business outside, you can run into certain issues. And apparently, not a issue based on that pasuk in Yecheskel. Incredible. So long enough. Okay. I don't remember looking like that last night. Okay. Says, I hope I prepared the right Amud. All right. Ayin Zen base. Well, I'll say 77b. No Mishnah. Beautiful Mishnah. By the way, I know you get excited. You think it's Agadata. It's not. It's not Agadata. But it's beautiful. I'm not going to lie. Sitting down to this last night after the Shabbos, I also pined for a little bit of Agadata, but it was not to be. But beautiful. Hashem. Hakadosh Baruch Hu knows what we need better than we know what we need. Right? What I need is some Agadata. Hakadosh Baruch Hu says, no, you need more carbon toda. He's right. Says the Mishnah, Mikulam hayanotel echad me'asara truma. Again, I will say, so remember, in our last Mishnah, what was really fascinating is remember, let's reignite the fire of excitement about this, because remember, what's happening over here is we're getting into the kishkas of karbanos. Now exactly when the Beis Hamikdash comes here, Rabbi Amenu, and we're going to offer up a toda, we're going to know exactly how to do it. So remember, last Mishnah I saw my flour allocations. Now I have all of my loaves. I've got 40 loaves. Remember, 10 of them actual chametz, 30 of them matzah. In the 30 that are matzah, 3 categories, 10 each. 3 categories, 10 each of chalos, rikikin, and revucha. Okay, so now mikulam hayanotel echad me'asara truma. And now again, I will say, so essentially, remember, the way we look at Toda is four groups of 10. 4 groups of 10, right? 10 chametz, 10 chalos, 10 rikikin, 10 revucha. Out of each category of 10, you take 1 loaf of truma. I'm calling it a loaf from each category. 1 loaf as truma for the Kohen. Good. Mikulam hayanota echad me'asar truma. Shneimar. The pasuk says, "V'hikriv mimenu echad mikol karban truma laHashem." Okay, so you take. So again, I will say. So what's interesting, what the Mishnah is introducing me to is we essentially look at each group as its own cohort, and therefore again you're going to take individual truma from each Toda loaf cohort. Good. So the Gemara says over here, give it to a coin. Echad echad. And when it says echad, that you have to take one, what does that teach me? Shelo yital pros. You should not go ahead and take a piece. But I will say, just how beautiful is this? Right? What week of Pesach? So the Gemara, remember again by Yachatz. What do? We take the middle matzah, we break it in half. Why do we break it in half? So the Gemara in Arvei Pesachim says, because again, remember lechem oni. We recite Magid over half of the matzah lechem oni. What does the Gemara say? Ma darko shel ani beprusa. Beprusa. The derech of an ani is an ani. A poor person doesn't have a whole loaf; he has a piece of a loaf. So again, just look at the same word, mamish. What are the odds of seeing the word pros on the mamish the week of Pesach? So echad. When the pasuk says you shall take a loaf means a whole loaf. Shel yitel pros. You cannot take a piece of a loaf. This is talking about for the truma that you give to the Kohen. A whole loaf. Mikol karban. Now again, I will say, what does this mean? Ultimately, again, from kol karban, shihu kol ha-karbanos shavos. To teach me ultimately again that all of the karbanos have to be the same. Now, what does this mean? Shelo yital mikarban al chavero. That ultimately, again, I will say, you can't tithe one toda on another toda. So in other words, let's say again, I don't know. It doesn't mean that I'm bringing two todos. It could be I'm bringing two todos. That's possible. It's possible. Or my friends, you can't tithe from one toda to another. Each toda has to be tithed on its own. La kohen hazorek tamashlamim lo yeh v'ashar. And ultimately, again, who gets the truma? It goes to the kohen who is doing the service. The kohen ultimately, again, who's going and offering up the damash, because remember, I will say the loaves is only one part of the Toda. It's also accompanied by a shlamim. Saloch l'maisa, the kohen who's doing the sacrificial service, he gets the truma of the loaves. So he'll get four loaves, one from each category of the Toda loaves. Incredible. Vashar nechal bailim. What happens to the remaining 36 loaves, 2 times chai loaves? Who gets that? The owners. And again, I will say, by the way, I think I mentioned this. This is also beautiful, right? Beautiful Karban Pesach time, because Karban Pesach and Karban Toda, by definition, what do they require you to do? You had to create the chabura. You had to reach out to other people, right? So it's interesting, right? Because no matter how much you like loaves, you're not consuming 36 loaves on your own. I guess if you have a very large extended family, right? But lamaisa, right? Even like Matzei Pesach, right? Even Matzei Pesach, you're not consuming all of that bread, right? All of that chametz part on your own. So Rabbi says, so it's interesting. What's the yisod? By definition, when you have a Karban Toda, you have to include other people. So when you have a reason to give thanks to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, it is important to share that with others. Because when you express your gratitude for what Hashem does for you, it encourages others to do the same. You know, there's this interesting idea like in Ruchnius. There are certain times in your Ruchnius where you're supposed to be modest. And lav dafka, like tzanua, and lav dafka, that you should be sharing what you do with other people. Right? A lot of times, tznius is very important. But then there are other times where it is important that other people know what you're doing. You know, I'll say, this comes up intentionally. This comes up like in Hilchos Tzedakah. On one hand, giving tzedakah in private is the highest level of tzedakah. On the other hand, giving tzedakah with publicity, not with arrogant publicity, but allowing your name to be used, especially again in institutional giving, is so incredibly important. Why? Because it encourages other people to do the same. Not in a showing off way, but people say, Ruvain's giving, and that's incredible. I should give also, not because I have to keep up with Ruvain, but because it inspires. Sometimes what we do inspires other people ultimately to do the same. With Karban Toda, when you go ahead and you bring this massive offering, and by definition you have to go ahead and invite other people, what that does is it encourages other people to express their hakaras hatov, their gratitude to Hashem. Because Rabbi say, we go through life, and all too often we are so focused on the things that are wrong and the things that are broken and the things that are in a state of disrepair that we don't see the things that are absolutely incredible. We don't see the things that are absolutely beautiful. And what happens? You get invited to someone's Suda Sauda, because that's what this is. You're getting invited to someone's Suda Sauda, and they tell you about the incredible thing that happens to them in life, and you take a step back and you're like, oh my gosh, all right, maybe this thing didn't happen to me, but I have so much to be grateful for. I will say, I'll tell you, like on a personal level, I had this moment this morning. I'm not gonna lie, I woke up this morning, I'm like, I can't do this anymore. I had one of those I can't do this anymore mornings. I'm not as young as I used to be. I'm like, I literally, like, the front lawn looked like a great place, just like to lay down and I'll say, then you take a step back, you're like, what the heck is the matter with me? I have everything. I have everything. Kadosh Baruch Hu is giving me everything in this world that a person could possibly ask for. Are there things in a state of disrepair? Of course, most of them are internal to me, right? Are there things that are broken? Absolutely. Again, most of them internal to me. But the sheer volume of bracha is absolutely overwhelmingly amazing. We forget about that. We go through life, we become so hyper-focused and so hyper-fixated on just the things that are not working. And because sometimes they're pretty significant, sometimes they're pretty severe, and we just get lost like in that chasm of just negativity. And comes carbon toda. So again, Reuven's offering up his carbon toda. The halacha is, Reuven, there's no way you're eating all of this yourself. So what do? Get your chaverim in there. Get your friends in there. And as your friends are munching down, chowing down on all the loaves, their avoda is, wow, Reuven's making a suda sauda because he has so much to be grateful for. What do I have to be grateful for? And I will say, this is the avoda. By the way, Karban Pesach is the same thing. Karban Pesach, when do you eat Karban Pesach? It's necha ala solo. Karban Pesach is dessert. You had your meal. So by definition, you have a whole lamb, and you have to finish the whole lamb. You're not going to finish that on your own. So what do? You invite your friends. And as you're sitting there with your chaverim, eating carbon toda, right, drinking shlivovitz, right. So again, right, oh, there's nothing else, right. Then you're having your lechaim of shlivovitz with your carbon toda. I'm sorry, with your carbon pesach, you are reminded. Look what HaKadosh Baruch Hu has done for us. And as I'm reminded what HaKadosh Baruch Hu did for us historically, I'm reminded what HaKadosh Baruch Hu does for us contemporarily. I will say, so much of being a good Jew is living a life of incredible hakaras hatov. Just living a life of complete and overwhelming gratitude. Gratitude doesn't mean that I forget about the things that are broken. I can't forget about the things that are broken because they're part of my daily life. And a lot of times the things that are broken cause me a tremendous amount of daily acute pain. But don't let the broken kite go ahead and totally eclipse the good kite, because there's so much. There's so much good. And the job of a Yid is to let that define my life each and every day. That's Karban Toda, that's Karban Pesach, that's bless you. That's what it means to be a Jew. All right, both say, let's go back to it. Tana Banon. So the Gemara says, so both say, this is really interesting. So now the Brisa kind of carries on in the Mishnah. The Brisa says, Tana Banon. So this is fascinating. You shall offer it mina mechubar. Now again, I will say, what does that mean, mina mechubar? So we are going to discuss. This is actually quite interesting, and this is a detail. Rashi says, so we'll say this is fascinating. At the time that you take the truma from the loaves, because remember again, you're taking one loaf from each category, all of the loaves have to be together in one utensil. Right? So the loaves are also 40 loaves, all put in what, I don't know, like some type of, we'll see, I guess, what it is, right? But Lamai says some type of big receptacle, and all of the loaves have to be together. I was like, can you just imagine how beautiful that must have been? Just like, if you ever, to me, one of the most beautiful things to see, if you're ever in Eretz Yisrael, like around Hanukkah time, so before Hanukkah time, like whenever you pass by a bakery, you see like the most magnificent arrangement of sufganiyot. Right, of like donuts, right, and it's just beautiful, and it's like an artistic display. Just imagine, that's beautiful. It's really like, I don't know, there's something so special about it. I'm talking about before you eat it, right? Just the ocular experience, just being able to take it in and to see it. Just imagine what it's going to look like to see 40 loaves, right, and each category looks different. And they're there, and it's not like on like some fashmutz like baking sheet, it's on a cliche. It's beautiful, and to see it there, just to be able to look at that in the Beis Hamikdash, the experiences that we're going to have in the Beis Hamikdash that we don't even think about. We think about like the big stuff, the fire coming down from the heavens, the Kohen Gadol, but just being able to see all of the loaves of a Toda magnificently arranged together, it's going to be ridiculous. The Gemara goes back there. So that's Mechobar. Next, Echad Shel Yitel Pros. One means halacha l'maisa when you give the truma to the kohen gadol, to the kohen, it has to be a whole loaf and not a piece. Mikol karban, from every karban, shiu kol karbanos shalos. All the karbanos have to be the same. Shlo yital min karban al chavero. Again, I will say we saw before, you can't tithe from one karban to the other. Truma l'Hashem, it says a truma l'Hashem. Ini yodea mikamahi. Now here's what's interesting. The one thing I don't know from this pasuk is, I know that I have to give some amount of the loaf, a truma l'Hashem, and by the way, in this context, truma l'Hashem means to the Kohen, right? Because remember, there's no part of the loaves that's burnt on the Mizbeach, right? So I have to give, but I don't know how much. Now again, you say, the Mishnah told me one loaf per category, shkoyach. How do I know that? So we'll say, watch this. Harini dan. It's a really exciting Gemara. Harini dan. Ne'amar kan truma v'ne'amar b'truma smaiser truma. It says over here by toda. Here means toda, truma, and it says by truma smaiser toda. And again, I will say, what's truma smaiser? Truma smaiser means I give meiser to the Levi, right? Ami Yisrael, I give meiser to the Levi. The Levi is then obligated to give truma from his meiser to the Kohen. So Levi gets his portion, he has to give a portion to the Kohen. So I will say, how much is Trumas meiser? Malahalon echamei asara. Trumas meiser means the Kohen gets his meiser, he has to give 1/10 of his meiser to the Kohen. So just like Truma, by Trumas meiser means 1/10, Afkan echamei asara, so to here 1/10 as well. Pretty easy. Or maybe there's another point of view. Nermar kan truma. It says over here by told the truma. But nermar bebikurim truma. It says by bikurim, first fruits, also truma. Mal halon. We'll say first white line. Mal halon ein lo shir. Now again, I will say by is the interesting halacha, right? By bikurim, there's no shir. What does that mean? Bikurim means you have to bring first fruits. How much do you have to bring? It's totally discretionary. So just like by bikurim, there's no shir. Afkan ein lo shir. So too maybe again the truma by toda also doesn't have a shir. To which the Gemara says, so I say you have two different limudim. It's because remember again, you've got truma by toda, and then you have two truma by truma smaiser, which is a 10, and truma by bikurim, which is no shir. So how do you know which one to compare it to? To which the Gemara says, near the midoma. To which one does toda more closely resemble? Done in truma she'ein acharei truma, mi truma she'ein acharei truma. Ve'el yochiach bikurim she'esh acharei truma. So we'll say it makes more sense to compare Toda to Trumas Meiser. Why? Because again, just like Toda, after you tithe it, there's no further tithing. So to by Trumas Meiser, after you tithe it, there's no further tithing either, right? Once the Levi gives the 10th to the Kohen, we're done. That's different than Bikurim. Because by Bikurim, even after you bring your Bikurim, is there more tithing? Absolutely yes. Where is there more tithing? On the rest of the crop. Remember again, by Bikurim, you're bringing some first fruits to the Beis Hamikdash. But after you do that, halacha l'maisa, you still have to tie the rest of the crop. Maybe there's another argument, right? Different approach. Done in Truma ne'achalas b'mkom kodesh, mitruma ne'achalas b'mkom kodesh. Listen to this. We go ahead, and let's say, and we learn Truma, right? So again, remember, all of this is based on the word Truma. So they're not Truma that is eaten in the Beis Hamikdash, or I should say in Makom Kodesh, in a holy place, that's Toda. Mitruma hanecheles b'makom kadosh. From other truma that is eaten in a place that is kadosh, v'al tochiach trumas meiser shenecheles b'kol makom. Say again, I will say, or maybe again trumas meiser, which is can be eaten anywhere. Maybe that's not the source halacha. So the Gemara says, Talmud Lomar mimenu truma laHashem. It says again by Toda, mimenu truma laHashem, uksib trumas meiser, mimenu truma. So I will say, not only does it say truma by Toda and truma by trumas meiser, but it says mimenu truma. So it's not just the word that shares the common, but rather again it's a phrase. L'gzera shava lamadnu l'truma she'echad me'asara. So from here we learn that halacha l'maisa, the truma from Toda is 1/10. So just like trumas meiser is 1/10, so too again the truma from Toda is going to be 1/10 as well. And again I will say what that means effectively for us is 1 out of each category of loaves. There's 40 loaves. 4 categories, 10 each, 1 loaf from each category for the Kohen. Aval ini yodea mikama hichala. Now again, I will say, interestingly enough, I still don't know how much ultimately soulless is in every challah. Harini dan. Ne'emar kan lechem ne'emar lalon b'shtei lechem lechem. It says over here by carbon told the lechem. Forget about saying now we're switching gears over here. I still don't know how much soulless is in each challah. So it says like this. It says over here lechem by toda v'ne'emar lahalon b'shtei lechem lechem. And it says by shtei lechem by shvuas lechem. Ma lahalon isar lechallah. Just like by shtei lechem, there's one isar per challah. Afkan isar lechallah. So too over here by toda there is also one isar per challah. Okay, lechala derech zu, or maybe go in a different direction. Ne'emar kan lechem v'ne'emar v'lechem haponim lechem. It says over here by toda lechem, and it says by lechem haponim lechem ma lahalon shnei esronos. Just like by the lechem haponim, there's two esronos. Afkan shnei esronos. So too over here there should be two esronos as well. By toda mira lemid doma. To which one is Toda more comparable to? The Shtei Lechem or to Lechem Haponim? Danin mincha ba chametz im hazevach mi mincha ba chametz im hazevach. Let's compare it. Remember again, Toda's chametz. So let's compare Toda, which is chametz, comes with the carbon and is chametz, to another carbon that comes with chametz, which means Shtei Lechem. Va'al yochiach Lechem Haponim she'eno ba chametz im hazevach. Lechem Haponim, on the other hand, is not chametz. So therefore, again, it makes more sense to compare Toda with Shtei Halechem, which is an Isaron per loaf, because they're both chametz, they both come with karbanos, and not compare it to Lechem Haponim, which does not come chametz. Okay, Lechel derech zu. We're going a different direction. Danin mincha ba me'aretz v'chutz la'aretz u'mina chadash u'mina yashan. So again, let's learn out now. Again, when it comes to carbon Toda, so again, remember again, carbon Toda could come from wheat from Eretz Yisrael or from Chutz La'aretz. It could come from Chadash or it could come from Yashan. And let's learn that out from another mincha ba me'aretz Chutz La'aretz min Chadash min Yashan. Va'al yochichu, which again that refers to Lechem Haponim. Remember, Lechem Haponim could come from Eretz Yisrael wheat, non-Eretz Yisrael wheat, Chadash Yashan. Va'al yochichu shtei Lechem shin bos ela min Chadash min Aretz. Shtei Lechem, on the other hand, can only come from Eretz Yisrael and can only come from Chadash. Talmud Lomar, b'moshvo seichem taviu lechem tenufa shtayim. She'in Talmud Lomar taviu. Pasuk doesn't need to say taviu. Uma Talmud Lomar taviu. Shekol ma she'ata mevi mimakom echad, mimakom acher, harehu kazeh. That whatever you bring from somewhere else has to be like this, like the Shtei Lechem. Ma lahalon isaron lechala. Just like by the Shtei Lechem, there's one isaron per loaf. Afkan isaron lechala. So to here by carbon Toda, ultimately again there is one isaron per loaf. Ima lahalon shnei esronos. Afkan shnei esronos. If that's the case, maybe you should say therefore Shtei Lechem is two esronos, right? Two loaves, two esronos. So maybe that's the total of Toda as well. To which the Gemara says Talmud Lomar. The pasuk says it shall be. It shall be means this is unique to Shtei Lechem, but ultimately again, but by carbon Toda you're going to have much more. So Abba says halacha l'maisa. Halacha l'maisa. It really turns out that a lot of the halachos concerning carbon Toda, specifically the amount of flour used per loaf, ultimately again is going to go ahead and be determined ultimately from Shtei Lechem. So really, we have two limudim over here. The idea of how do you know that the truma of carbon Toda is 1/10? That's learned out from truma mimenu gzera shava, the truma smaiser, and the volume of flour per loaf is learned out from a gzera shava from Shtei Lechem. Incredible. So lamadnu asar lechametz, asar lematzminayin. So I know that halacha lemaisa. I learned that there are ultimately again 10 for chametz. 10 for matzah. How do I know? How do I know that? Tushimar says Talmud Lomar achalos lechem chametz neged chametz haba matzah nimtzu esrim esronos lachmei toda asar lechametz v'asar lematzah. So if again I will say the fact that there are 20 esronos, so that teaches me again. I learned from there 10 of them go for matzah, 10 of them go for chametz. Yochol asar shebematzah lo yu kulan elami min echad. So again I will say I would have thought like this. The 10 isronos, remember again, there are 20, it goes back to the Mishnah, there's 20 isarn of flour that is allocated towards the carbon Toda. Half of it, 10 isronos, right, 10 isaron go to matzah, 10 go to chametz. The 10 for chametz, it's one isaron per loaf. One isaron per loaf. So I should say maybe the same thing applies by matzah. And who says there's 4 different categories of matzah? Maybe there's just one category of matzah. Talmud Lomar, im al toda yakrivenu. Vehikriv al zevach toda, chalos matzos belulos b'shemen, urekike matzos mishuchim b'shemen, soles mervechas. So the Gemara says, come on, that's an easy one. That the pasuk is explicit. The pasuk itself speaks about all the different categories of matzah. Nimsu shlosha esronim ushlish lechol minu min ushalosh chalos lisaron. So therefore, it turns out that there is 3 esronim, right? 3 1/3 esronim for each category, right? Shalosh chalos lisaron v'nimsu lach metoda arboim nota mehen arba v'nosin lakoin v'ashar ne'achala bailim. Several of us, if we pull this all together, it turns out really as we started that ultimately again there are 40 loaves of the toda. 20 isaron of flour, half of 10 isaron goes to the chametz, 10 isaron goes to the matzah. The chametz itself ultimately again is made up of just 10 loaves, 1 isaron per loaf. The matzah is made up of 3 different categories, what we call chalos, rikikin, revucha. Ultimately again, the 10 isaron is evenly divided amongst all of those. Truma is taken from each of the categories, 1 loaf per category. That we learn out ultimately again from Truma Smeiser. The Truma is given to the Kohen. So the Kohen gets a total of 4 loaves, 1 from each category, and the remaining 36 loaves consumed by the owners of Osai. Shkoyach. Stop over here. Chiras Chametz is going to take place in the classroom right across from the base manager. Shkoyach, everyone. Everyone, have a great day. Alavai, still time to see all of you in Yerushalayim. It's Hashem. We're coming.